Unleashing Leadership Potential's mobile app will enable you to view and listen to our monthly leadership conversations about leadership development through engaging with prominent ethical leaders, hearing their stories, and learning from their successes and failures. Access premium content and teachings for a small subscription fee. By downloading the app, you can access teachings from Maurice Khadebe, access monthly free content, exclusive Q&A sessions, stay up to date on our up-and-coming events. Download the app now.
And I think if we can achieve anything in ULP is to unleash leaders that would have a sense of mission and a sense of purpose. And that's, and all of us can make this world a better place. His great quote that I like is a fundamental concern for others in our individual and community lives would go a long way in making the world a better place we so passionately dream of. And it is in that note that I think the person who's going to speak today shares this value. I've seen him doing more than just his job, but going out into the community, participating in the leadership structures in community organizations, and making a huge impact in this nation. And not just thinking about himself, but making an impact in the community. And that person is Bonang Mohale and Ndate Kindate. I'm very, very proud of him because he's from Katleho. And I'm saying this with due respect to people from Soweto, but can you move on to... Because even now, if I travel over, wherever I am, I travel overseas, they just assume, hey, oh, Maurice, yes. I'm sure you want that about Soweto. Oh, you're from Soweto. Oh, good. No. We're from East. And he grew up in Klapo section. And those who are from Katlo and Klung, yes, in those late rats, yeah. I'm sure Kulas Katik Sakanama Okapi, Nesco's knives, Kunze. But he came out of that environment, and now he's the chairman of Shell South Africa with country responsibilities for oil and chemical, aviation, marine and lubricants. There's something common between me and him. We're from Katlehong, both of us. I grew up in Skosan and then ended up in Ramkunupi. And he's in oil game, I'm in the oil game. Yeah, no. So go to the East End, you'll come into the oiliness. No, I'm joking. But he's a great leader. I have a huge respect for Bonang. 1996, he's fulfilled various roles since 1996. He's been a chief executive of Drake & Scal, a facilities management company. He's been a chief executive of shared services and associated companies in Sanlam. He's been an executive vice president of South African Airways, responsible for strategic alliances. And it would be very good in that to help that organization again. Where I met him also was when he was running Otis. It was amazing seeing this young, energetic, driving this company, lift company. And in South Africa, he did a great job. His academic background, he went to medical school for 4 years, doing pharmacology, and then he went into pharmaceutical industry and gained a lot of experience there. And he is a chartered marketer, which is a very, very powerful qualification. We only know chartered accountants, so we're not aware that there is a high qualification of chartered marketing, and this very, very powerful qualification. But he's a leader. I mean, he's chairman of a number of companies, including South African Petroleum Industry Association, which both of us belong into that organization. He's a director of Holland Insurance Company, chairman of South African Netherlands Chamber of Commerce, and our leader in Black Management, the president of the Black Management Forum. He's a stalwart of that organization. I'm not going to waste any further time. If I can read the CV of Bonang, I'll spend the whole night. That, over to you.
On a serious note, I don't know why so many people would brave the cold and the late evening and the comfort of snuggling up to a beloved one to come and listen to a township thug. But I'm truly honored that this looks so full. When Tate Maurice sold this to me, he says, it's 8-10 people, very intimate conversation. When they leave, they want to have a better understanding of Bonang, the man, where you come from, the stones in your shoes, the scars on your back. And on that basis, I agreed. So I wasn't aware that I was going to come and make a presentation. So if you're expecting one, there isn't one. But we're going to talk about where I come from, what has shaped me to be who I am, and what are the 2-3 things that drive me. But when I came here at 5:30, I walked around this hectare, this farm. I must say I was very emboldened. It's an amazing vision that you have here, Babu Khadebe. And what you are building here is going to outlive you and I. And I really feel truly and absolutely humbled that I'm just one of the 2-3 people that are going to have a conversation to try and touch other human beings, especially the youngsters, in a very special way. Some of us who are approaching 40, we value these opportunities. So ka ho he batho ba holo ka nnete ntumeleng pele ke fitise tlhompho e kgolo ka hae ka mmusong. Jalo ka Basotho ha re kopane le ha le mafu le ha le moqoqopelo re ne re ha re le mmoho re etsa hlahlela le laka le leng re ne re ise tlhompho ho ra Basotho motlotlehi morena mohato le tsiye wa boraro setlohotloholwana sa pete le magabane sa mokgatšhane le poqo sa rahakadi le beula yena beotseng ra mo naheng ditedu a dire shweshwe ka lehare ka ho he le tlile kweneng ho tla mamela mokwena wa mokotedi mogodutswane o moholo o a jarile lehlabathe ka mokokotlo ke phatakalle ya ileng a iphumanela lerato ho Susana moradi wa Mohlongo o hlonolofaditswe ka baradi ba babedi nkgono Tshepiso le nkgono Maneo ke baradi ba babedi fela tjhe ha ona le dikgomo re ka qoqa. So pele o tseba Mohale ho ntso hlokahala hore e se re o kopana le ngwana batho mo o bo so qetella mo metile o sa botsa hore wena hantle ha eno ke kae e re o tla o mohutsi mo mma wa o sheba ka mahlong re wena o tlile le motswalao ntse le sunana ha thu suna ngwaneng. So nna he ke Bonang Mohale ke Mokwena Mokotedi nna ntate ha ntsheba wa re for pisi khaula ditota re bone wetsise mauleng tatao mohlango le mohlatsa tsile le holo mohlano phala ditsobaloi tutentsa modi di batauleng Mohale ha matha wa lelala o tsepa sela shibile hodima yo kena ba holo bo modinyane le ntinyane motse o senang Bonang wa hlora a re ke le ranthane la ntithile ya banana ba le pume ba latla fatshe ba re le sale le tshikisa Mohale na ha o tsheka wa tsheka Mokwena o mpasitwa a kwa gamolala o tsheka jwalo ka mankukune se etsa jwang a holo ke basadi ba ntse ba mpotsa khafetsa Ante ba mpotsa kgafetsa Bonang ha eno ke kae ha eso ke hole sebakanyana a se bohole ba o pala mapere le ba maoto ba ntse ba fihla ho dikoti nka ba ke le bontsha nka kgathala kwa ga monwana jwale ka hore se le tseba he ka nnete ke a itebohela jwale ka hore se le tseba he hore o ke mokwena buang le lona jwale ba bitswang bahlakwana ha se ba kwena hobane ke re ba tle ka difaqane ha re keneletswe ke tjhaka a re palamisa thaba ebile re bitsa thaba bosiu morena moshweshwe ke yena fela a sa kang hatswa ke bakoni ba ka tsatsi la difaqane fela ka o rata khotso ya ba o ba fa dikgomotse o re tsamang le tsona le o ja le re sie ka khotso ke ka ho he batho ba re ke bahlakwana hobane ba hlahule kwa. So I'm meant to tell you a little bit about myself. So I think we'll do that best when this is called conversations. So in our conversations, we are really going to have a dialogue. So you're going to ask me lots of questions, and then I'm going to answer them, and hopefully when I do that, by the time we leave, even if it's just one or two expressions that we have interacted, engaged, and interfaced, you will know that I would go back much richer than when I came here. And I'm hoping that by the time you go back home, you'll also be slightly enriched. I apologize for my sexy voice. Kalabubedi, I was down with flu. And the doctor said I should spend the whole week in bed. And I said yes. On Wednesday morning, at 6 o'clock at the crack of dawn, we're already selling Shell oil products and working humbly without anybody knowing. So it's Thursday today. We've been working the whole day. So I'm hoping that my voice will not fail me. But I thought as we are going to have this conversation, please stop me at any time and ask questions, because I think as we do that, we learn best about Bonang the man. The last time I checked, I think I was a man. But we are talking about this in the context of leadership. And in my book, the definition of leadership is he or she that feels called upon to lead is a leader. So from that definition, a domestic servant and a gardener, all they have to do is to feel called upon to lead. Therefore, we look at them, we acknowledge them, we palette, highlight, and celebrate them as leaders. So leadership has nothing to do with the positional power, has nothing to do with the title that you have, has nothing to do with the lineage that produced you. It has everything to do with the hunger that you have for success. So maybe to define success, for me, success is a progressive realization of any worthy ideal. Therefore, success has nothing to do with buying a hectare like Ntate Khadebe has done, or driving a BMW X5M with 10 cylinders. But it has everything to do with how you feel at a personal level you are doing in ticking those 3-4 things that you have set for yourself on a journey of self-discovery, touching other human beings in the process, so that when you do things only for yourself, the day you go, you live with those things. But when you do things for others, you are immortalized. You live forever in the minds and hopes, dreams and aspirations of others. That's what Ntate Maurice Khadebe is trying to do with this unleashing leadership potential, because all of us have potential. If a convict who has got no experience whatsoever in politics, at the very best, his only prowess is putting together an AK-47 in under 47 seconds, and have been antisocial for probably 27 years, therefore lacks the interpersonal skills, has never cradled a baby in his own hands and heard the scream at 2 o'clock in the morning of a thirsty child, can go on to become the greatest leader of this nation. All of us can unleash this potential within ourselves to wake up one day and accept that we have become much more than what we have been made, and internalize the fact that we are indeed much more than what we've become. So for me, these leadership conversations, we have them because we compare and contrast management on the one hand and leadership on the other. Because management is what we learned at school: planning, leading, coordinating, and organizing. We call that management 101. It's about the effectiveness and efficiencies in climbing the corporate ladder of success. It's about self-centeredness. Anybody that has tried to kiss another human being knows that that doesn't take you very far. Leadership, it's about being the other-centered, being absolutely obsessed with the development of others, not with the self. When other people are making progress in their own career paths, on their way to being also called chairman, leadership begs the question as to whether the ladder is leaning against the correct wall to start off with. So leadership is that higher order where you know that you have probably attained all that you want to achieve. And again, you don't need to be at the pinnacle of your own journey, but you just have to climb. And as you climb the corporate ladder of success, you extend a hand so that you lift as you rise. That is leadership. You don't have to be at the final destination, but it's about enjoying the company of others. There's a Chinese proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, take somebody with. So leadership, it's not an individual sport. It is a team sport because it's about a journey of self-discovery. It's about learning two things. It's about feeling compelled not to go to bed without sharing it with somebody else. It's like in tutorials at school when you know that I have to learn to share with others. The learning is deepened and it's widened. So we do this leadership thing because we are all very partial about obtaining extraordinary outcomes, superior results. So for me, let me just conclude just by giving you a framework that I find works. And then in the question and answers, I'll give you probably 2 or 3 other frameworks because it's nice in management balance to give these things names. But we do them first and then try and give them names afterwards. So because we call it leadership for superior outcomes, we accept that probably it resides in about 3 buckets. So the first bucket is that of context. If you are a leader and you don't understand your context, you might lead in a wrong way, or you might lead your people astray. So before you take up any leadership position, especially when you are a managing director, president, CEO, or chairman, and you are already coming in at a higher level, it begs the question to say, but what have I been called upon here to solve? It's important. And if we make an example with the greatest leader, Nelson Mandela, he understood this absolutely. That's why the gift he has left us is this united, inclusive, non-racial, constitutional democracy. If we had time, each of those words is gravid with meaning. That's why there are certain things we can't do purely because of the choices that we made. And he gave us the most amazing gift of reconciliation. Ndate Mori says, if I had personally spent 27 years, not by choice, I think I would have killed a few people. But he gave us reconciliation. A lot of you know the story that on the day that he was going to be released, he had made very humble requests to say, my tormentors for all these years, I want that as I leave the gates of Victor Verster prison, they should be standing on either side of the door so that I can shake their hands and acknowledge the relationship that we've had for so many years. The wires were sent to all the ambassadors. The time was set. The world knew because we had attempted to cross many Rubicons unsuccessfully. That was the moment. And the doors opened, and he looked on the left, there was nobody. He looked on the right, there was nobody. And he went back and said, but I thought I had a request. His release was 4 hours late. The people who were in charge of the program said, we thought you wanted to bring your tormentors so that you can torment them. He said, but why would I do that? They sent for them. 4 hours later, he shook their hands. Mission accomplished. The famous photograph was then taken. This is the man who knows that probably the most painful of crimes that could be perpetrated against a people is to deny them hope. The person who engineered, orchestrated this thing called the Grand Apartheid and wrote a book about it and institutionalized the fact that there is no point in teaching an African child mathematics because they will never rise above certain forms of labor. That very person, because that type of injustice will take generations to wipe off. This is the person who said, but I'm going to break bread with the wife of Verwoerd, and made time, energy, and effort to sit across this person to break bread. So when you see these acts, you say, as a youngster who grew up warm with shoes on your feet, going to school every day, what right do you have to be angry other than also to embrace this reconciliation? My grandmother who brought me up says, unforgiveness, because I'm translating it from Sesotho, is like drinking poison and hoping that it will kill your enemy. So when you learn to forgive, you force yourself to grow. And leadership is about personal growth and development. So that piece around context is really and truly very profound. Mandela understood this. And the context was, there was a white world and the black world, and never shall the twain meet. Most white people in their whole lives, their only interactions with black people was as servants and as gardeners, helpers and as gardeners, nothing more. So if all your life you have learned to give instructions to others, how would you ever unlearn that and one day learn to accept them as equals, let alone as bosses, as the executive vice president of Sasol? You will have an ulcer. But most black people like myself, whenever you needed extra money, you couldn't find it in Katlehong where we grew up, because all of us lived in 4-roomed houses. They all looked the same, and thank God we didn't know that we were poor, because it was all uniform, and we were embarrassingly happy. But if you needed some extra money, you went to Leondale, to Alberton, to Elsbeck, in a white man's yard to go and do gardening. That's where you came back with a sandwich that had an egg, bacon, and butter at the same time. So when you grew your whole life taking instructions from white people, all your life, and then one day we put you in Sasol and a Shell and say, from today you need to be assertive and learn how to engage, interact, and interface with others as equals. without unlearning the old, you'll see that it will be difficult. So that context is really important. When you are an African manager, a progressive manager, who has got no appreciation that there are mothers and fathers, uncles, nieces and nephews today who still wake up to take the 3 o'clock bus at KwaMhlanga to come to Pretoria to start work at 8. And take a bus at 7 o'clock that same day to go back. If you do the math, you see that this person will never see their children during the day, ever, except over the weekends. And now you are a manager. If you don't have that appreciation of that context, you'll find yourself managing the same way that you were managed, without just having not just the humility, the empathy to understand what they've gone through to be where they are. Isn't it amazing that those teachers that have high expectations of their pupils generally do well? So when you are that type of manager, understanding this context, still raising the bar, it's amazing what you can accomplish working with this energy, with this force, with this impetus. That's what has produced us. That's what defines who we are. That's why, as a manager, I am very different from the way I was managed. So that context is important. So if I were to give an example in Shell terms, there was a time when we got the reserves wrong, and we called it the reserve crisis. Jeroen van der Veer was the CEO, the analysts and the investors lost hope in Shell. We were the second biggest in the world. Our share price went to number 6. Without solving that, it doesn't matter what else we could have done. The pain that needed to be solved is get the analysts and the investors to start believing the figures that come from Shell as the reserves. Then you can move forward in space and in time. Without doing that, you'll miss the point. So how many of us spend time, energy, and effort to get into this leadership position to say, I have learned lots of things through my leadership journey, but in this company I'm new, I know nothing. The best I can do is to humble myself to ask the people, what are the things that are keeping you awake at night? And how do you suggest to solve them? Because 8 out of 10 times, they know the issues, they know the solutions. Because we have learned that, especially when you're new, your people don't care very much about how much you know. They just want to know that you genuinely care about them, not about yourself. That's why context is important. The biggest skill you bring at that time, it's not your ability for strategic planning processes. The biggest skill you bring is your active listening abilities. Because listening, it's an art. Hearing is a faculty. All of us can hear stuff. Listening, really listening, especially the unspoken word. Reading between the lines. These are the skills that come very natural to women. Not so natural to men. And yet you wonder why women are not adequately represented in positions of leadership. Primarily because men feel insecure. Nothing to do with women. Everything to do with the gatekeepers. So that's why context is important. So the second one, without unpacking it, is about direction setting. Leaders lead. It sounds very simple, but it's not simplistic. So that's why it sounds very nonsensical when now we embark on campaigns that says teachers must be at school on time and teach. What the hell were we expecting them to do? Because that's what they're paid to do. Pupils must learn. What else could they do? So when you are a leader, your job is to say we are going to turn left 1 degree. And that's it. That's what you do. How you do it is important. Maurice and I can say this without any fear of retributions or reprisals because he is my brother, he's my family, and we share so many things in common, including our faith. I didn't say our religion. Yeah. We choose to be consultative and participative. We spend a lot of time making sure that we take everybody on board, first and foremost, so that by the time we get to execution, everybody's on board. Yeah. And it's not our vision. It's not our dream as the chiefs, but it's our collective visions and our collective dreams. That's very important. So how you do that is really important. So direction setting, we do that by getting into this organization and first listening. And then we play it back to them and say, so what I hear you tell me is that we're going to turn left 1 degree. And you see people nod vigorously. Then it means you've actually got it. You'll know that you are succeeding when you hear the men in the urinals talking amongst themselves without being aware that you are there, saying, we have decided that we are going to turn left 1 degree. Not the new boss has decided. So when we grew up, we were told that you need to develop a vision and then come and sell it to get buy-in. We do something different. We do the co-crafting and co-creation. Because fundamentally we believe that just because you are called chairman, you have no monopoly on intellect. In fact, there are lots of your subordinates that are 10 times cleverer than you, 10 times more hardworking than you. All you have to do is to unleash their potential. That's why it's called unleashing leadership potential. That's why I agreed to be here instead of being on the bosom of Mohale, where it's warmer. The last piece has to do with this thing called organizational capability. Because we lead in organizations. Most of the leadership things we talk about, we said are team sports. So 20 years ago, it was okay to be a superstar. Today, we measure, recognize, palette, highlight, and celebrate your skills in how you tessellate it like a jigsaw puzzle within a broader scheme of things. To what an extent do you function effectively in a team? Germany just won the Soccer World Cup because all 11 players played as a team. Yeah. Brazil, on paper, had by far the most number of individual superstars. Leadership is won as a team sport when all of us are facing in the same direction, like in a marriage. Marriage works when the two of you are looking for the same things. No, not liking the same flavor of ice cream. When we are pulling in the same direction, because that's when we talk about this third alternative, this thing called synergy, where 1 + 1 = 3. And nowhere do you see that miracle than in a marriage, where you meet somebody who already has a 32 set of teeth, set in their ways, but because of this something called love, are prepared to change. Prepared to look at the other person's fun and what the other person really is about, rather than themselves. If you do that well, you will be described as a good kisser. So this organizational capability is in that context that we are looking for people that can see their role and how they can affect others to unleash this further. So it rests on 4 legs. The first has to do with people. Can you imagine leadership of just cattle, where there are no people? So good leaders talk straight, they extend trust. They start first with the who and then the what. Because when you start with good quality people, they will help you figure out even the what. When we say people are our greatest asset, we mean that. Because companies that are inappropriately located can always change their headquarters. The ones that are short on money can leverage their position and go and borrow. But a company that is short on people is a dead company. Why are people important? Because all of us in companies, what we are trying to do is to create an ecosystem that is very difficult to replicate, to steal. Because I can bet today the technology exists. For somebody to eavesdrop into Sasol at 12 o'clock and find out the price they're going to submit for the RFP response, to Anglo, the technology exists today. They can get that price. When you submit your 7 archive files of your company, who you are, how you go about it, and you send it to some government employee, you know that those files could go to your competitors. And they often do. But they could never call themselves your company because it's so difficult to replicate that ecosystem. How you engage, interact, and interface in that company. How things are done here. Who's chief, who is Indian, who respectfully and with honor does the janitorial stuff, and who leads like a good servant. That's what you can create. That's why we start with people. The second leg has to do with systems and processes, because they allow us to do stuff. Because without it, you might forget. When you have a company, it's not unreasonable that you could get a request that says, Mary Bomela used to work for Shell in 1929, can you confirm? You've only been in that company for 4 years. But with system and process, you are able to go and write them a letter that says, here is a reference. I have nieces and nephews, and I love them to bits, and I think they love me in 10 because they tell me, say, Malume Bonang, you are the only one who always remembers our birthdays. And on the day, not the day after, you are bringing us something. I normally bring a fruit basket because they don't drink, I suppose. And I take out my BlackBerry because I'm still old-fashioned. And it's because every single sultry one of your birthdays is programmed here. So at 8 o'clock it goes twing, it's, oops, Metandi allow me to go to the shop so that evening kilo bona bachan. So that's what systems and process can help. Then there's this piece called structure. So in Management 101, we're told that structure follows strategy. Here it's really important why somebody is called chairman and why somebody is called the rock driller. And in India, they've perfected this. Each to their own, and what you have been called upon to do, you do with pride. So if you're a parent and your daughter says, but Dad, all I want to do is to be a bus driver, there is no point in persuading her to go and study MBBCH. The best you can do as a parent is, my daughter, let me work with you to make you the best bus driver there is. So if you are a floor sweeper, you want to be the best floor sweeper there is. That's your job. You need to do that better than anybody else. So there is no point in the rock driller at Lonmin coming out of the mine to head office in air-conditioned offices to tell the Lonmin directors how to run the company. That's not their job. Their job is to blast the hell out of the rocks. That's why structure is important. When you confuse this, you'll end up into problems. The problems we have now in education, where our outcomes are the worst, even though we spend 10 times more on education than Botswana, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, all put together. And yet our numeracy and literacy is worse than all of those countries. It's because we have allowed labor now to appoint principals. That's not their job. They don't even have the requisite skills to be able to do that. But also managers have absconded. Managers' job is, these are your people, they work for you. So from time to time, at least once a quarter, you must tell them how the company is doing so that they know. That's why they can demand 12,500 rand, because they don't know how the company is doing. Because you have forsaken your job as a manager to talk to your people. You talk to your people through the shop steward. So now the shop steward is telling the people, "Hi, baya dlabo sire. How begi moto bahamba ngaso." Where else in the world have you ever seen a union taking a company to court for talking to its own employees? It's your own employees. That's what managers do. They talk to their people regularly. But managers have shied away from that, and they don't do it. because we don't understand this structure. But we do worse. These shop stewards that are now good in representing the workers' interests, we have now co-opted them. And we pay them management salaries. Now they drive cars. And by so doing, we effectively force the distance between the workers and the shop stewards. And we wonder why one day when they wake up and they just say, it must be 12,500. Because you have not had a conversation. So structure is really important. When I was the managing director of the world's biggest and oldest elevator company, Otis, 1996, I was already called managing director. Not of a South African Otis, of a sub-Saharan Otis. We had a presence in 222 countries and locations. I looked after the whole of Africa. At that time, it was only 53 African countries. Now it's 54. First 3 years I reported to Paris, the last 2 to Madrid. Not every quarter, every month, as the managing director of a listed entity on the Johannesburg Securities Exchange, I had a conversation with all the workers. Open book. We have 13,872 lifts. We charge on average 1,000 rand per lift, per building. And this is what our books look like. This is how much money we've made. And I did that for 5 years, meeting with our own workers, our own employees, a month, every month, not once a quarter. Because if I didn't do that, then what is the job of the MD? To drive around in a navy blue Prado VX. It can be. So structure is important. The last one I just wanted to touch on. Remember I said the 4 legs around organizational capability. So that you don't forget, I said it starts with people first, systems and processes, and then the last piece, which is structure. It's culture. And let me submit that there is nothing more important in the job that the people in this room are going to do other than that of determining the culture of an organization, the culture of an entity. How things are done around here. And that is normally said top down. Most things are bottom up. This one, please allow me to say it is top down. So the culture of an organization takes the character of its leader. I worked for South African Airways as executive vice president. And one day I came back on Saturday morning at 9 to go to the 6th floor on the C building where we were located. You needed a special code as the executives to get to that. There were only 3 of us, Coleman Andrews, myself, and Andre Viljoen. When the doors opened, there was a reception on the 6th floor called the executive reception. You have passed the reception at the ground floor. And on this particular morning, the lift doors opened, and I wanted to go out. I thought I'm not seeing well. I went back to the lift and held the doors because I couldn't recognize this area that I was in. I looked at the number, and it says 6th floor. I looked at it, looked different. The whole furniture of the 6th floor had walked. I was there on Friday evening. On Saturday morning, it's 9. At the very basic was a coffee table and a 3-seater sofa with a 2-seater sofa and a 1-seater. And a cabinet which was full of awards because SAA is an award-winning African airline. It had walked. So it's unlikely that people from Alexander would have jumped the fence to steal these sofas. Very unlikely. That's the culture that was set by the leadership. To say when you start taking things that belong to the company home, you give permission to the rest of the organization to start taking the building home one brick at a time. And they did. So in transformation terms, this culture, biblically speaking, talks about the parable of the 4 seeds And my Bible says there was nothing fundamentally wrong with any of those 4 seeds. The one that fell by the road and was eaten by the birds, the other one by the rocks could not develop roots, therefore no traction, could not do. But there was this lucky seed that fell in fertile soil. It grew and bore fruit in abundance. So when you look at this art called farming, farming is a vocation. It's not what you do when you've got spare cash. Black people grew up farming. We farm. That's what we do, we farm. That's why it's very un-African to find an African who says, but I can't clean. Because when you are a boy, you wake up, your mother instills it in you and says, what will you do one day when your wife is sick? Learn how to cook, learn how to, so you can look after your best half. So black people clean. Black people do gardens. Black people farm. Because we grew up in farms. We farm. So the farmer spends 80% of his or her time not massaging individual seeds, but in tilling and preparing the soil. That is called preparing the culture. When the culture in our organization is good, any seed that can fall on this fertile culture can grow roots, thrive, blossom, and bear fruit in abundance. So it's nonsensical today when you look at 51.7 million South Africans and say, but there's a death of skills in South Africa. It can't be. Because nobody is born a managing director. Nobody is born a chairman. All of us, somebody believed in us and took a chance, counsel, coached, and held us by the hand. We did this chairman thing trembling. Because everything, when you do it for the first time, looks cumbersome. But by the time you do it for the 7th time, it feels comfortable and you get confidence to do it. You cannot learn how to swim from reading a textbook. At some stage, you have to dip your big toe in the water. That's how you learn. So we should not accept it when our companies tell us and say, but there is nobody experienced here. We could not find a South African. There are no skills. What they mean is that we have lots of talent. And we just saw the talent sing now. We just saw talent from Windmill Park. These people are not chairmen and MDs, but they are starting a revolution. And I'm hoping that in telling my story, now I can stop here, just on that piece around culture, and take your questions and comments and some violent disagreements. So you know, when I leave here, Naki asifubeng sama Mohale. If you do the math, so 1996, I'm not a product manager. I'm not an export manager. I'm not a head of department at Sandoz Products. I'm called managing director of the world's biggest and oldest elevator company. So I must have lots of strikes in my days, especially when people go on strike, they target the biggest companies because they are visible. And they've got systems and processes, and they've got a brand to protect. So lots of strikes. Strikes are not pleasant things. So as a manager, you try and avoid strikes, first and foremost. So let me tell you why this is important. When you talk to firefighters and you ask them, how has your day been? Those of you who are married to some. Their most exciting days is when the alarm rings. They go shooting down this pole, down, they get onto the fire trucks, the engines are blaring, screech to a halt, the hose pipe is in, and they come up with ash, with sweat from their brows and say, gee, what an exciting day. That's what firefighters do. Ntate Maurice and I, in running energy companies, our job is to prevent fires. There is nothing sexy about preventing a fire. But there's a lot of things sexy in putting out a fire. You might even be a knight in shining armor and get the dame. But that's understanding the context. Our job is to prevent fires. If we have a fire at Alberton Depot, it has a capacity of 30 million liters now, a throughput of 1.4 billion. This is the biggest depot in Africa. If that thing catches fire, we incinerate Alberton. Yeah. And I've got family living in Alberton. So every day, we check our systems and processes. We suffer from this thing called chronic unease. When a lot of managers get into Alberton and they find that things are working okay and everybody is in their jobs, instead of being happy when they make presentations and everything looks green and say we're meeting our KPIs, we get very worried. And we say, what is likely to go wrong? What have we missed? What is likely going to come from the left field and surprise us? And we have a fire, and I'm known as the chairman that oversaw a shell that incinerated Alberton. We have access to 21 depots. Alberton is only one of them. Imagine trying to repeat that 10 times. Then it means you have to be very sober, but very purposeful, deliberate about the things that you do, but mostly about the things that you do not do. So when you are a manager managing a company, your job is to have regular conversations with all your stakeholders, your board, your subordinates, your employees, not just your exco, to make sure that you avoid having a strike. I started by saying I've had a number of strikes. Our job is to avoid them. But sometimes people are people. So you are at Otis, 222 Marshall Street, 6-story high building, and all of a sudden they see Mohale from Katlehong. Now he lives in Bedford View. He has left 12 Hub Street in Rhinefield in Benoni. But hey, we are Khura Mohale. Hey, Mohale wa Khura. Ronans erlima pala. Let's go on strike. There's a bargaining forum, but Mohale wa Khura. Isuge. When that happens, now that calls the mettle of a leader that you are. So when there's a strike, you say, but let me understand the triggers that led us to this. Let me show empathy as a leader. The idea is not to beat the strike. The idea is not to beat them into submission. The idea is not to be clever. The idea is to say, I think I've heard your message. You are unhappy. Let me see if I can provide coffee. And we sit and we chat. And we talk. Man, used to say, man's greatest accomplishment is through talking. But man's greatest failures is through not talking. So the Palestinians have been fighting for more than 50 years, and the Israelis. They are not as fortunate as we are to have a one Mandela and one F.W. de Klerk at the same time, of the same mind, who want the same thing. We could easily have been Syria, Libya, Egypt, but we are called a miracle. And the reason why we are called a miracle is unlike what people do ordinarily when they go to a negotiating table, going there with strategies to see what they can get out. We went to the negotiating table prepared to give up something. That was our point of departure. So when you come to a negotiating table prepared to give up something, isn't it amazing how you reach out to the other? So when you have a strike, you're not trying to please your board to show them how much money you can save. It's about how you can meet the other party, understand, empathize, because when you avoid a strike, the board can see how much money you have saved. So sometimes we try to be heroes and heroines by focusing on very superficial things. Human nature is very deep, and all it needs is just understanding. When you smile at people, you acknowledge them as human beings, and you genuinely listen. Imagine when your wife wants to clap you when you are smiling, and before your arms are already up and say, "I'm sorry, darling, it's my fault." How do they torture you even more? How do they torture you even more? So I think that helps a little bit. It was Napoleon who said, "Leaders are dealers in hope." That's all we are doing. So when you get onto a big ship, you do three things. You first ask where that ship is going. And if it's going where you are going, you are likely to get in. The last thing you do, you take your faith, you put it in the captain's hands. You lie back and you enjoy the ride. The same thing in an aeroplane. That's why both of them are called captains. At crucial moments, there's only one finally accountable person. This is not leadership by committee. When times are tough, the captain says, "This is what I'm going to do." Everybody rallies behind that. They help. That's how the team performs. So to give your people hope, you need to work with them to a stage where they will ultimately believe in you, trust you, because you have extended trust. When I started, I said leaders is about extending trust. So it's not about coming in and saying, "Trust me." It's about, let me work with you to a point where you feel comfortable with me, to share with me your deepest secrets. That's all we are trying to do in companies. Because the people who are running these companies, they have the institutional memory. When your people don't want you to succeed, you will not succeed. When you are trying to outwit them, they will show you who's the boss. The 1972 strike, and the one that was led by Cyril Ramaphosa and James Mutlatsi, Bobby Godsell was sitting on the other side as the CEO of Anglo Gold Ashanti, had nothing to do with bread and butter issues. Nothing. Had everything to do with, let's fight for a rightful place around the table. Workers have a way of showing you who's boss. Bazaklaza. Ime inkampani. Intutu iqime. Gnuge. Then you'll know who's boss. So those are the two questions. The third one, it's about how do you know? What are the characteristics? You see, leadership is an amazing thing. It is natural, it is automatic. It is unplanned and it's born into. It is both a skill and an art. It can be learned, it can be developed, it can be honed and harnessed. You must watch kids in a play environment, especially in the pit tent. Especially when there's food involved in a party, they don't do each other. So you open the pit tent and they're all over, and it's sand everywhere. And that's how they play. It doesn't take long before one of them figures it out and says, "Guys, this is chaotic. This is entropy. So here's what we are going to do. Nani, there's your corner. There are your toys. Mbali, there's your corner. There are your toys. I'll hear, you are there, we play, and then after a period of time, we can swap." Have you seen kids do that? They do it without diction. But somebody creates order. Naturally. So they've got these things called jumping castles when there are parties. So they see this thing and you stop in your car. Before you switch off the engine, the door is open. Somebody has bolted and it's on this thing. And as they do this, they are all over the show and there's no order. And then the one's shoe is in the other one's eye until somebody says, guys, this is not working. So here's what we're going to do. This is kids, eh? Here's what we're going to do. Okay. So all the ones that are on this thing, you go that way. You come up this way. You slide this way. And then you go out that way. Now let's do it again. Let's do it again. In 2 hours, there is order. That's leadership. when you approach work with the energy of a child, first, the child does not know what is it that they cannot do. They think that they're immortal. They think that they can boil the ocean. And with that approach, they approach life. And that's why your children will climb the tallest trees. They'll do stuff. And it's the parents who say, don't come. And the more they wake up in the morning, and the first thing they do, they don't look at you, grab you, and say, what are we going to eat? Those are not children. When the children open their eyes, they're already playing. And they want to play. They want to play with you. Say, but I'm going to work. And they open your eyes and say, Dad, but you are awake. And say, no, but they want to play. They are playing. They just play. Then their mothers look at the time and say, yo, they must be hungry. And call them and say, come in and eat. Those are children. They forget to eat. You have to bring them in. And when you bring them in and they can smell the bacon and the eggs and say, come in and say, no, we're just doing this last thing. The more they play, the more energy they get. So imagine if you approached work with the energy of a child. The more you work, the more productive you become. The more productive you are, the more energy you'll get. There will be no such thing as, but my interest 10 things. These are the 4 that I want to do. These 6 are me, because you approach it with an energy of a child. My grandmother used to say, intense work is rest. So let me start with this one. Allow me to mix and match them so that you'll see there's a theme as I conclude and sit down around the role of family. So when I was young, I got married to Susan Intombi kaMhlomo uNjomani when I was 17. Sure. So 24th of August 2014, Susan and Bonang Mohale will be happily married for 33 glorious years. Yeah. So when I look at Susan, and it's just the 2 of us, we have been blessed with 2 divine daughters, Tsepiso and Maneo, only 2 girls. When I look at her, it's just the 2 of us in our room. More often than not, it's the bedroom. I look at her and I say, if it wasn't because of you, I know for sure I'd be in jail. You made me who I am today and what I am today. So everything that is referred to as a shred of success, Susan takes credit. Because when you get married that early, you know nothing. You understand nothing. You are simply following blind passion and unbridled hormones. And that this woman can still stay with the original husband, so happy and glorious. 33 years later, I need to give her a medal. I really need to. So early on, as we were struggling, like all black people who struggled, by the way, not all of us black people grew up driving Prados. Ne? We are from the township. Very few fathers, Bontate Iti Chabalala, Bumaponya, had bathrooms inside the house. Yeah. So for us, Mfana was outside. So when we were talking and struggling and building, and you know the first house you want, you can't afford. You know for sure. But you say you're going to build it slowly, you know. So Susan and I are onto our 8th property, 8th house, 8th. Now it's looking decent. But the first 2 were not. But that's a journey you have to walk. So now I look at my daughters and say, but I want my first house to be in Branston. And I say, first Mkuku, next garage, but to clean the toilet. So as we were talking about this, and say, but how will we know that we are successful? We landed on 4 things. And I said to her, you know, I will know that I'm successful when I can produce embarrassingly good results at work and still married to you and still find time in my busy schedule to spend with my community, and then lastly to honor my faith. So let me start first. Why embarrassingly good results at work? I made a covenant that the first job I look for will be the last. Last. Because the demeaning nature of standing at the gate and giving them your ID book, at that time it was passbook, or applying for a job and being interviewed 7 times. And your boss looks at you and say, we were not really looking at you, but you are a curiosity. And let's take you to the next round. It's just too demeaning for words. So I said, and I got the first job on the 17th of April, 1984 at Pfizer. Dennis Chambers was the country manager. Barry Scott was the marketing director. Those are the people who gave me my first break. And I said, this will be the last. I want to work so hard that the other company must see what I'm doing for Pfizer, Pfizer, that they must come and ask me to do the same with them. Because then at that time, I don't have to queue. I don't have to send my ID. All I have to do is just to simply tell them what I'm on, and they must lure me to jump. Isn't that nice? And as the good Lord will have it, that was the first job I ever looked for. That was the last. It's amazing the power of faith. It's amazing the power of conviction. It's amazing the power of clarity of thought and the singularity of purpose. So for me, it was important that the results speak for me, because when we went to the world of work, we knew that we were not needed, not wanted. And our bosses at that time went out of their way to make the work environment very hostile. Yeah. Imagine you come into work to add value, but they made it hostile. Hostile. So that you feel that you are a visitor here, a temporary sojourner. And I said, no, I want my results to speak for myself, so that even if you hate me with a passion, but you can't take away my results. That was my only salvation. I didn't know I was poor. I'm one of 7 siblings in total, 5 girls and 2 boys. I'm bang in the middle. So the love was already finished with the 3 girls. When I came, the spoiling couldn't happen, so I couldn't say, that they leave the house with me. In the middle, you're on your own. So you have to make do. So I knew. So that was the first, and say, embarrassingly good results at work. The second, why married to Susan? So now I'm MD. We go to a beautiful place called Forte Village in the island of Sardinia, on the south of France. There's 78 managing directors of Otis in one room, and then we're talking. 85% of the people in that room were onto their second marriage, if not more. Sure. I developed goosebumps. I said, this thing called work is very inimical to marriage. I chose Susan. She didn't choose me. I'm not one of these guys who are approached. And I said, but how do I live with myself when I've put this woman through so much? And now that I'm called managing director and I am worth something, and some people can look at me, not because they like the shape of my nose, but probably the size of my non-existent wallet. How do I make peace with this? I then said, I need to do everything possible that I never get disconnected to the one that I loved. You see, I understood for me when it said, and a man, not a woman, and a man, because the problems always come from the man's family. Yeah. And a man shall leave his mother and father and cling to his wife, and the two shall become one, period. That was defined marriage. It said nothing about children. There was a reason why there was no comma there, a period. So for me, I was in this for keeps. First, Susan is very easy to love. She's truly the most amazing, beautiful, good quality woman. So the third was, you know, the reason why Muslim people are so successful and the Jewish people are so successful is because they leave nothing to chance. So when a Jewish person has a piece of land in Sandton, you can bet your bottom dollar that the architect is going to be Jewish, the builder is going to be Jewish, the electrician is going to be Jewish. But when African has money, they want nothing that will remind them of where they come from. When other nationalities have made it, so 1652, dromedaries, reiger, and goede hoop. Lands. So the first thing they look at this blue skies and African sunshine, and they say, this could be home. The first thing they did, they said, let's build monuments that look like home. That's why today the Cape is called Cape Dutch architecture. Because they wanted, as they live so far from home, from their beloved ones, that at least in the comfort of this, it still reminds them of home. How many of our homes, even the murals and the art, does not reflect who we are? Africans, with their own money that they've borrowed from the bank, when they build their own big company called Monte Cassino, they said, but we want the architecture to be Tuscany. Not Khutlon Sabanaba Mohale, Mehotlo. That's what we do. So, for me, spending time with my community was absolutely critical, because if you do not know who you are, Oprah says, money will define you. Instead of being the stuff that allows you to do stuff. So I fell in love with Susan when she had nothing. Susan looks at me when I'm sleeping and says, I know every single solitary one of these hairs because I saw it sprout out of your face. And what an amazing honor and privilege. She sees me and knows me naked. She has explored every cubic inch of my body without my permission. So what can I do to try and impress her? Nothing. The only way I can try to impress her is to be myself. And my daughters know. They've learned it from me. The first thing I say is, I'm sorry. 7 times a day. Because I must tell you, it's very uncomfortable to sleep on the floor. So I'm always eager to sleep close to her. Even when I've got flu. And she said, and say, but I'm taking antibiotics. The doctor said, I'm no longer infectious. So that community was important. Because otherwise you are like the reed in the middle of the river. So it goes this way and you think it's your culture. It goes that way and you say that's the way we do things. When you know who you are and your kids know where they are, when my kids look at me, they say, my children, so when they slaughter, they'll slaughter go Bryanston. But when I slaughter, I can't say Hesuki Bryanston. I go and slaughter in my father's house. But I tell them, say, your home is where you grew up. You grew up here. You grew up watching MTV. I didn't. So I slaughter at my father's house. You must feel comfortable to slaughter at your father's house. Your father's house is now here. So that's why that sense of community is important, because the kids who don't know whether they are Arthur or Martha or anything in between, they are the ones that steal other children's cell phones on the playgrounds. The ones that are brought up well, they don't. They stumble upon these cell phones, they've got their own iPhones, and they take it to lost and found. The last one. The reason why this thing, faith, is so important. I didn't say religion, I didn't say Christianity, just faith. Especially for us as black people. It's just the realization that there is so many of us. So many of us. And why you, like a sieve of rooibos leaves, when you pour as a strainer into your cup, the one or two that punched through, it's me and Maurice. There's nothing special about those leaves. There's nothing special about the size of the strainer. We were just lucky. We punched through. So because we're so lucky, we know that there are cleverer, more hardworking ones that were trapped by the system. But we made it. To show our eternal gratitude, we come back and try to increase the size of the holes of the strainers so that more punch through. So when you've been brought up with that humility of your wife seeing you naked, and sometimes she gets into the bathroom and says, "Oh, you didn't knock." I say, "King excites me." So when we've been brought up that way, it's very difficult to develop an ego. All men have egos. My grandmother used to say, the world would accomplish so much if we didn't care about who takes the credit. That's when the ego comes in. So when you are called a leader, you say, I'm done with the self. When you are called chairman, we can't go any higher. Yeah. That's why we have no hair. Yeah. This is called the concrete. Yeah. We can't. So we accept that we've been blessed with accomplishment, standing on the shoulders of giants. Now our job is to be obsessed, I use that word, with the development of others. Yeah. We want to catch our people doing the right things, palette, highlight, and celebrate them. Only insecure, very menial people with small organs are always wanting to take the credit for themselves. Very small people. People who have accepted this, when they open their mouths, they say, you know, I was talking on Tuesday with Memadi Khetsi and she gave me this brilliant idea. Palette, highlight, and celebrating others. Because that's where you find meaning. When you see in a room like this and say that one and that one and that one came through these hands. Today, Maurice and I pride ourselves that there are many CEOs of companies that used to work for us. Yeah. And we liberated them. So when you Google Carol Hunt at Otis Elevators, she used to be my PA. She's on their exco. When you Google Karen Bester, I'm here with my boss, Ntate Nelson Sitole. We work for Shell. Karen used to be my PA for 4 years. Karen is a boss in our retail division as a manager. That's what you do. You look at people and you see what they can become, not what they are. That's leadership. Here's the last one. So faith, the role of faith, you can tell that I was brought up with some sort of faith that says to punch through, there must be something. Preternatural, whether you call that Allah, Jehovah, God, Mata, Mudim, it doesn't matter, but an acknowledgement that there must be a purpose. You must be called upon to do something. And you are searching for that, and you will do it even if you don't get paid. Tiger Woods would play golf even if he wasn't getting paid. He loves it so much. So when you follow your passion, the money follows. But those who chase money are unlikely to have any. So if there's anything that we've learned this evening, is let's be passionate about something. Let's believe in something and stop at nothing to pursue that with the singularity of purpose. And the sense will always come in. My grandmother used to say, fill your mind with the sense that come out of your pocket, and your mind will fill your pockets with bigger sense. What are my self-thoughts? I have lots of thoughts. The first is a wholesome, pure thought about the life I've been blessed to have with Susan. The second most profound thought is how can we honor our parents who had nothing, but who still sent us to school, and we never were found wanting. So my father passed away in 1979. I was 17. That's why he passed away and said, I've got nobody, and say, Susan, you are the only thing I know. I didn't cry. I was so overwhelmed, I didn't cry because I'm the only elder boy. There was no time to cry, and he died in my hands. When I thought I was giving him a bath on his bed, and we were talking, and I didn't even realize, and he just slumped. I had no time to cry. I had to find my mother. She had gone to buy vegetables. It was Sunday morning. You know, record vegetables that morning, because we cook fresh. But I cried for the first time in 2000, when Susan and I bought my mother a house in a suburb called Leondale. And we took her there, and she trembled and opened, and the door opened. I cried. I cried for the second time in 2003 when we bought Susan's parents a house in Leondale. When I saw their joy, and they looked at me and said, my son, you didn't have to do this. I said, it's not me, it's Susan. Susan, it's him. Just to be able to honor our parents, so that every weekend we can take our two daughters, Tsepiso le Maneo, to go and be with their grandparents. Because your grandparents are the only people that love your children unconditionally. They spoil them rotten because they know they don't have to live with the mess. So Tsepiso, last May, she qualified in her international MBA at University in Madrid, Instituto de Empresa. She now works at ENY. This is her 4th month. She's honored her mother. She owes the mother about 64 million that she needs to pay back, £1 at a time. The second and last, King Khunu Maneo, she's named after my great-grandmother. She just passed her 3rd year at the end of April at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. She went so far away because she wanted to run away from her parents. It's been an absolute privilege really to just stand here and share with you just my journey without just chronicling where I've been. Because when one steadily burns the midnight oil, one gains access to the domain of knowledge and wisdom, the world of meaning, the world that cannot be conquered without a persistent crusade. Ruri ke le rata ka lerato ba kwena ba hamokotedi. Wa o tona mpa di khashaletse ke khotse moroko ke a itebohela.
So an ethical leader looks at what significance am I going to make? That's how he measures himself or herself. Significance in terms of the people, the impact I'm going to make in the lives of people, and how am I going to develop people, how I'm going to make them to achieve their talents and potentials and really achieve their significance in life. And that is a more valuable measurement that one you need to put in.
You really have to know the difference between right and wrong. In your life, you have to know the difference between right and wrong. You do wrong things, they will catch up with you. If you perhaps unfortunately pass away, they will catch up with your children.
There are choices that we make for ourselves every single day. Every single day, we are faced with this choice versus that choice. And you've got to really think about your choices, about your life and how you manage your life and your career and your aspirations and what you want to do with yourself. It is a really active process. Every day, at least I believe so, every day it's about actively managing what I want to do.
When you sit down and you face your day, just be sure of what your compass needle is telling you. What is your direction? What are your values? Remember those. That is your guide. And if you make decisions, all of your decisions in relation to your matrix of values, then you'll be okay. You'll do the best you can. That's the best you can do. You can't do better than that.
We must know what we stand for. We must know what we represent. We must know what we want to achieve. And we must be able to extricate ourselves so that we don't believe that we become infallible or irreplaceable.
But integrity is wholesomeness. So that what you think, say, and do, it's one and the same thing. You don't show up differently. That what people see, it's what they get. They don't have to second guess you.
Leadership is service. It's selfless service of the people that you lead. It is owning the decisions that you make. It is being humble enough to recognize the mistakes that you make.
So you must be able to build that self-recovery mechanism within you to always bounce back, to never allow people to write you off, and because you remember what I said, that your dream may be delayed, but it can never be denied.
So we're pioneering, we're bold, we are ever evolving, we are ever innovating. Very, very important characteristics, in my view, for an entrepreneur. If you want to remain relevant and stay ahead of the pack, just because you were the best yesterday doesn't mean you're going to be the best tomorrow. So you have to constantly be challenging yourself and saying, what am I going to do differently tomorrow? What am I going to do differently tomorrow? What new product am I going to bring in? So that when your competition is trying to catch up with you, you've moved on, you are one step ahead.
We can all say that we have values, but it's only seeing how we behave we can tell if those values are working or not. There's a very important connection. Behaviours are so much more visible in terms of how people do things.
And along the way, you will have all sorts of barriers. You will have barriers of financial resources. You will have barriers of not even have enough knowledge in the subject that you want to handle. But if you stick to the plan, and you are enthusiastic enough, sufficiently enthusiastic, then you are going to achieve your goal.